This is Chung Myung. Though abandoned as a child, he displayed remarkable intelligence from an early age. With immense potential, time passed, and before anyone realized it, the once orphan child had grown into a man who surpassed all the other disciples in his sect. Only at the very moment of his death does regret finally take hold of him. He realizes that his downfall stems from arrogance. Arrogance in his own talent. Arrogance that made him forget that everything he achieved was granted by the sect. He reflects bitterly that had he truly followed the teachings of his cultivation, things might have been different. His thoughts drift to his senior brothers and junior brothers, wondering if they might have survived had he chosen another path. Thus a once-in-a-generation prodigy, the Plum Blossom Swordmaster, one of the three greatest swordsmen in the world, slowly closes his eyes, weighed down by immeasurable regret. The battle between the 9 sects and one guild against the greatest demon in history ends in complete annihilation. Every participant falls. Even Chung Myung perishes. Only after severing the heavenly demon's head at the cost of their lives does the war finally come to an end. Yet fate refuses to let his story conclude there. A solid thwack echoes as a wooden stick strikes a young boy's head. Like a dream, Chung Myung's consciousness, just moments after fading, snaps back into awareness. Pain surges through him as he awakens, only to find that the terrifying heavenly demon before him has somehow turned into a filthy little beggar brat. Before he can process how such a thing is possible, the brat arrogantly orders him to get lost and go beg elsewhere. Chung Myung attempts to reason with him, but his efforts are met with nothing but ridicule. Another strike comes crashing down. He instinctively raises his hand to block it, only to freeze in disbelief. His hand is far too small. Before he can react, the brat beats him down mercilessly. Chung Myung stands beside a stream for a long time, completely dazed. In more than 20 years at Mount Hua, he had never suffered such humiliation. Fury ignites in his eyes as he struggles to comprehend what just happened. Just as he considers returning to settle the score, he glances at the water, and his entire body stiffens. Reflected in the surface is the face of a small, unfamiliar child. At that moment he realizes that he truly should have died. The only possible explanation is that what Buddhism describes as reincarnation has occurred. A young beggar approaches him cautiously. Having witnessed the earlier beating, Chung Myung takes advantage of the moment to learn about his situation. However, the information he receives leaves him unable to remain calm. Not only is this body genuinely that of a beggar, but a full 100 years have passed since the demon subjugation war. This is not simple rebirth. It is reincarnation after 100 years of samsara. The realization leaves him unbearably lonely, as though his connection to the entire world has been severed. What shocks him even more is what he learns next. The current 9 sects and 1 guild still exist, but Mount Hua is no longer among them. Instead, the present powers are Shaolin, Wudang, Ashen Sect, Kongtong, Qingcheng, the Lotus Order, Southern Island Sect, Kunlun Sect, and the Beggars Guild. Mount Hua has been forgotten. At best, the young beggar has heard rumors of a small sect that once existed at Mount Hua in Xingxi province, but it is said to have already perished. The news strikes Chung Myung like a thunderbolt. He cannot imagine it, nor can he believe it. Mount Hua, which once stood alongside Wudang and the northern royal family as one of the 3 great sects, had fallen within just 100 years. He releases the beggar's collar, unable to recover for a long time. After a long pause, he speaks with a trembling voice, expressing his disbelief, and declaring that he must go to Mount Hua to see the truth with his own eyes. The young beggar sighs helplessly, and asks how he plans to reach Shangxi. But before the question is fully formed, Chung Myung has already disappeared from sight. Running, reality quickly asserts itself. His weak body flushes red, his breathing becomes ragged, and his legs threaten to give out. At this rate he will die again before ever reaching Mount Hua. With no better option, he decides to cultivate. Finding a deserted grove, Chung Myung begins the first internal energy circulation of his new life. His memories contain countless divine techniques, but he knows better than anyone that greed leads only to destruction. Therefore, he chooses a basic method, the 6 Harmonies technique, as the foundation for this body. This technique is so common that it can be purchased for 5 coins at a street stall. Yet its value lies in its long history, refined repeatedly by generations of immortals. It perfectly purifies and stabilizes the practitioner's body. Chung Myung is deliberately building the most solid foundation possible. As energy flows through his body, impurities are cleansed, and his internal energy becomes perfectly refined. He gathers it into his dantian, understanding that this small dantian will serve as the cornerstone of his journey toward higher realms. However, he overlooks one critical detail. When the circulation ends, he collapses onto the ground, utterly drained. Even lifting a single finger is impossible. This body has yet to adapt to cultivation. The following afternoon, the small town bustles as it always has. Suddenly, a group of beggars storms into an alley in a frenzy. Their daily earnings have been stolen by a single small beggar. Unable to defeat him themselves, they bring their boss. They find Chung Myung starving, devouring leftovers with reckless abandon. The boss sees an opportunity. Children earn more when begging, and he intends to take everything for himself. Unfortunately for him, Chung Myung has already begun adapting to his body. These people pose no threat. With only a few punches, the three men are beaten into complete submission by the young boy. As dusk approaches at Mount Hua, an elderly man opens his window to let out mosquitoes. Suddenly, a disciple announces that a child wishes to see him. The sect residence is worn and dilapidated, clearly a shadow of its former self. Yet the old man's face remains calm and dignified, exuding a quiet composure. The visitor is none other than Chung Myung. After enduring countless hardships, he has finally returned to his former home. He formally declares his intention to join Mount Hua sect. The old man studies him with meaningful eyes before asking whether the child has been informed that Mount Hua no longer accepts disciples. After receiving confirmation, both elders turn their attention back to the boy. They never imagined that beneath Chung Myung's bright smile, his heart is blazing with fury. When he first arrived at Mount Hua in this body, he had felt genuine happiness. Though the mountain path was treacherous, he had endured worse. However, upon reaching the mountain gate, he discovers that the Mount Hua plaque has completely vanished. The very plaque his senior brother once polished spotless every morning. His commotion draws the attention of a disciple inside. The disciple confirms that this is indeed Mount Hua. Seeing the approaching nightfall and unwilling to send the child back down the mountain, he brings Chung Myung inside the sect. Thus begins the return of the demon to his fallen home. What should have been a magnificent training ground is now nothing more than a ruin. Even the floor tiles have been pried away. The heavenly palace that once stood proudly on the left side of the gate has vanished as if by magic, leaving behind nothing but bare ground. The disciple understands all the reasons behind this devastation, yet shame prevents him from explaining them clearly to the boy. All he can manage to say is that the heavenly palace is Mount Hua's glorious scar. Hearing this, Chung Myung's heart softens. He reflects inwardly that there is no justification for blaming them after seeing the effort they put into keeping the dying sect alive for so long. When the two arrive at the Yueyuan temple, the place used to receive guests, the disciple explains that Mount Hua follows the Tao tradition. Since its founding, it has always honored the principle of hospitality. Visitors are expected to pay respects to the ancestors first. However, the moment Chung Myung steps inside the hall, he is completely stunned. The golden candlesticks that once stood there, the ancestral scrolls, the hall filled with paintings and calligraphy, every single item is gone. More importantly, the fragrant white plum blossom and the purple cloud divine sword that once stood beside the memorial tablets, plain yet embodying the very essence of Mount Hua, are gone as well. The disciple explains plainly that a merchant took a liking to them, and so they were sold. A dull thud echoes as Chung Myung weakly collapses to his knees. The disciple finds the boy's reaction strange and approaches him with concern. Before he can get close, Chung Myung suddenly snaps back to his senses and forcefully kowtows. He declares his desire to join Mount Hua sect and earnestly requests an audience with the sect master, and so time returns to the present. Along the way, Chung Myung has already prepared his explanation for becoming a disciple. He plans to claim that junior brother Chung Jin went missing during the Great Battle, having fallen off a cliff and survived only because a passing woodcutter saved him. Due to severe injuries, Chung Jin was unable to move. To repay the woodcutter's kindness, Chung Jin taught him Mount Hua martial arts and accepted him as a disciple. Chung Myung would then present himself as that woodcutter's descendant, placing him in the same generation as the current sect master. As he waits quietly for the sect master to question him, the old man instead responds calmly, agreeing to let him join. Seeing the boy's shocked expression, the sect master explains further that since Chung Myung wishes to join, his request will be granted. He shares his belief that fate is governed by cause and effect. People do not chase away birds that seek shelter from the rain under their eaves, so there is no reason to refuse a child who has come to them willingly. With that decision made, the sect master instructs the disciple to arrange accommodations for the boy and prepare the initiation ceremony. Meanwhile, Chung Myung's mind races wildly. He realizes that his generation rank is already set. He will become a third-generation disciple. Left with no other choice, he consoles himself with the fact that at least he has returned to Mount Hua. However, over the span of 100 years, Mount Hua's internal structure has changed drastically. In the past, disciples never lived in shared dormitories. New disciples resided in their master's quarters. Regardless, the presence of shared guest rooms means someone already occupies them. Just as Chung Myung is about to look around, a loud voice behind him startles him. The voice demands to know who he is, and accuses him of peeping into someone else's room like a thief. The outburst draws the attention of many third-generation disciples, and in an instant, Chung Myung finds himself completely surrounded by children taller than him. Fortunately, a sharp reprimand interrupts the commotion. From the surrounding disciples, Chung Myung learns that the man is the instructor responsible for their training. The instructor is not surprised to see him, having already heard that a newcomer would be assigned to White Plum Hall today. He instructs Chung Myung to rest for the night and begin training the next day before leading the others away for evening lessons. Before leaving, however, the boy named Sahyung glances back at Chung Myung. He appears convinced that the newcomer has sticky fingers and delivers a vicious warning, promising that sooner or later he will correct those bad habits. Left alone, Chung Myung remains standing in place. At that moment, he realizes that Mount Hua's revival must begin with these children, even if the method ends up being somewhat unconventional. That night, under a bright moon and sparse stars, Sahyung-gul returns from evening lessons. After confirming that Uncle Ungum will not return at this hour, he gathers a group of brothers and heads toward Chung Myung. Their intention is to force him into obediently enduring a collective beating, though Sahyung-gul fails to notice the faintly gleeful expression forming on Chung Myung's face. Chung Myung calmly instructs the senior brother to put more strength into his neck. The very next second, before Sahyung-gul can even react, a punch lands. A thunderous boom erupts from the roof of White Plum Hall. All the senior brothers freeze in shock, as Chung Myung slowly withdraws his small fist, smoke rising faintly from it, his expression filled with satisfaction. He announces that the senior brothers should take their beating first. Screams and wails fill the night, startling even the birds roosting on the roof, which scatter in all directions. Inside the hall, the disciples kneel in a neat row before Chung Myung, their heads swollen with bumps. Sahyung-gul lies flat on the ground, not daring to move. Chung Myung beckons the troublemaker forward and begins questioning him about the shocking Heaven Palace and the reasons behind Mount Hua's current decline. According to legend, 100 years ago, Mount Hua produced a plum blossom swordmaster, Chung Myung himself. After personally severing the heavenly demon's head, Mount Hua's elite fighters all perished in the campaign. In retaliation, remnants of the demon cult set the sect ablaze. The resulting losses were so devastating that Mount Hua has never recovered. At that realization, Chung Myung freezes. This means that the true cause of Mount Hua's downfall was none other than himself. The following morning, burdened by heavy thoughts, Chung Myung awakens without having slept deeply at all. At that moment, a senior brother carefully calls out to him, addressing him as junior brother. Chung Myung opens his eyes. It turns out that Uncle Ungum is notifying everyone to gather at the third training ground. When Chung Myung arrives and sees the senior brothers practicing swordplay in neat orderly formations, he is rendered speechless once again. The previous night, he had already realized that these children's foundations were extremely weak. Learning swordplay at this stage is like reciting scriptures before learning how to read. Though it may appear that they are progressing faster than others, such advancement is nothing more than a fleeting flash in the pan. At the same time, confusion weighs heavily on Chung Myung's mind. Mount Hua's decline can only be described as catastrophic. In just 100 years, even the training system has deteriorated to this extent. He turns to a senior brother beside him and asks what else they have learned, aside from this sword technique. He immediately regrets asking, when he hears that Mount Hua's most exquisite sword technique is now called the equilibrium sword technique. Chung Myung almost suspects that his ears are deceiving him. Back then, his senior brother, the Sect master, had clearly stated that the equilibrium sword technique no longer resembled Taoist martial arts, and that its power was far too weak. Chung Myung had deeply agreed and even suggested that the technique be eliminated entirely. That decision had been settled long ago, yet now the disciples are still learning it. This realization makes his heart sink further. Could it be that the 24 moves plum blossom sword technique has truly been lost? That night, Chung Myung calls out to a fellow disciple who now treats him with visible respect. In a mysterious tone, he asks the disciple to help prepare several things and to ensure that all third-generation disciples gather in front of White Plum Hall at dawn the following day. Sahyung-gul, intimidated by the authority of this so-called demon, reluctantly agrees. After giving his instructions, Chung Myung's gaze gradually sharpens. He assesses Mount Hua's current state with cold clarity. The sect has no money, no martial arts, and no talent. The only thing he can possibly change at this moment is talent. However, no matter how he looks at it, the third-generation disciples do not seem promising in the slightest. Still, he acknowledges that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. If Mount Hua is to rise again, then these senior brothers will have to become that very first step. The next day, before dawn has fully broken, the boys gather noisily in front of the dormitory. Those senior brothers who have never dealt with Chung Myung before wear undisguised sleepiness and dissatisfaction on their faces. Although Chung Myung anticipated this reaction, he knows he still has to deal with their morning irritability. He puts on an innocent smile and warmly invites all the senior brothers who have not yet been beaten by him into White Plum Hall. With a loud bang, the door slams shut, appearing to be locked from the inside. The group remaining outside suddenly feels a sense of relief. After all, none of them want to become the early worm that gets eaten by the bird. After the dormitory building shakes violently for a while, the children who were brought inside are finally released by Chung Myung. Each of them stands straight in front of him, posture rigid, as if they have just completed a brutal round of boot camp. Only after confirming that they are all obedient does Chung Myung clasp his fists and announce that they will train together every morning from now on. As dawn breaks and the sun begins to rise, Uncle Ungum grows puzzled. The little ones have not come to pay their morning respects as usual. He wonders whether the arrival of the new disciple has led those rascals to perform some strange ritual and oversleep. Already planning to scold them severely, he heads toward the training ground. Upon arrival, the man in his 30s freezes in disbelief. He cannot understand why his once adorable disciples now resemble pitiful little beggars. He grabs one disciple who has not yet collapsed, demanding to know what happened. The disciples exchange glances with one another, yet none dare to speak the truth. This silence makes Ungum's heart skip a beat. What could possibly make these children hesitate even in front of their uncle? A quick glance tells him it is not Gull behind this. Following their gazes toward the platform, he sees a young man carrying a wooden sword with massive stones tied to both ends, stones that appear heavier than the boy himself. He hears Chung Myung exhale deeply through his swollen face while counting aloud. At first, witnessing Chung Myung's shocking training intensity fills Ungum with worry. He fears the child might collapse at any moment and quickly calls for water, urging Chung Myung to rest. He then asks what led to such extreme exhaustion. It would have been better not to ask. The explanation makes Yoongjin realize something extraordinary. He explains that the senior brothers were simply filled with enthusiasm, and because it was the first day, things may have gone a little overboard. Meanwhile, the disciples frantically signal him with panicked expressions, clearly terrified of the boy standing before them. Ungum understands everything. Initially he had worried that the boy might bully the weak, which would go against Taoist principles. He had planned to issue a warning, only to discover that Chung Myung not only respects hierarchy, but also claims he will strictly follow the instructions of the eldest senior brother. Despite having single-handedly subdued all third-generation disciples, he used nothing but discipline to drive their training forward. With that realization, Ungum finally breaks into a grin. This child is far from ordinary. Ignoring the pleading looks from the disciples, Ungum strides away from White Plum Hall. From this moment on, Chung Myung's demon training plan officially begins. That evening, a cool night breeze passes through the sect, yet an unusual scene unfolds in the disciples' dining hall. Though the children are dressed in martial attire, they are so weak they can barely lift vegetable leaves. The less refined ones have already abandoned table manners entirely, resorting to eating with their hands. Joe Gull, once the school bully, seems completely indifferent to the noise and complaints filling the room. Despite his own exhaustion, there is no dissatisfaction in his eyes. The same is true for their eldest senior brother. Propping up his weary body, Joe Gull calls out to the senior brother eating alone. The two of them leave the dining hall together and face the evening breeze in silence. After a long pause, Joe Gull finally asks what he thinks of Mount Hua. The other finds himself unable to answer. In Joe Gull's eyes, Mount Hua sect has long since passed the point of saving. At worst he can still return home. His senior brother, however, is different. He knows that this eldest senior brother has long had no way out, and has already prepared himself to dedicate his entire life to Mount Hua. However, that resolve has begun to change. Ever since Chung Myung arrived, Joe Gull has started to waver. Though he was forced into it at first, this experience has made him realize that he has never once pushed himself to such extreme limits before. Meanwhile, Chung Myung endures several times more training than the rest of them, yet shows no signs of fatigue at all. Watching that guy, Joe Gull gradually forms the desire to give everything he has. As he slowly turns around, his face reveals the determination and anticipation unique to youth. He expresses his hope to become someone like that kid, someone destined to command the world in the future. Seeing this, his senior brother cannot help but smile. In truth, he shares the same thoughts as Joe Gull. After all, watching these two boys submit to his guidance in just a few short days brings a sense of quiet satisfaction. Chung Myung himself is quite pleased, deep inside, though he understands that the road ahead is still long. What comes next? Just as this thought crosses his mind, an angry curse suddenly erupts from outside the mountain gate. A strong sense of foreboding wells up within Chung Myung. There seem to be many people gathered outside. Without saying a word, they forcefully smash open Mount Hua's gate. One after another, voices shout as they demand to see the Mount Hua sect master. Yoongjin and Yunyin appear troubled, neither daring to strike, nor capable of stopping them. Amid the chaos, the truth becomes clear. Mount Hua, in its current dire state, actually owes debts to outsiders. Just like that, a large group marches straight to the sect master's residence. The sect master initially wears a kind and gentle expression, but the moment he sees the visitors, embarrassment surfaces on his face. Leading the group is pavilion owner Kong, a shopkeeper by trade. Though his face is full of smiles, his words are sharp as blades. He points out that the great Mount Hua sect has had overdue debts for quite some time now. 7 days, he declares. If the money is not repaid within 7 days, they will confiscate Mount Hua's buildings. That night, darkness blankets the sky, with not even a trace of starlight visible, mirroring Chung Myung's gloomy mood. The third-generation disciples have long known the various reasons behind Mount Hua's troubles. Still, they are young and incapable of handling such heavy matters for the sect. However, when the name Tai Hua is mentioned, the visibly agitated Chung Myung suddenly pauses, as though he has heard something unbelievable. After confirming it again and again, he can no longer restrain himself. Tai Hua clearly belongs to Mount Hua, who gave them the audacity to come collect debts from Mount Hua, and even shamelessly attempt to confiscate its buildings. Yet something does not add up. If Tai Hua already belongs to Mount Hua, why would Mount Hua borrow money from Tai Hua in the first place? Chung Myung's eyes flick toward Zhou Gol, signaling him to bring what he has prepared. In the blink of an eye, Chung Myung changes into an assassin's outfit. At a glance it is difficult to recognize which handsome young man he truly is. With the helpless looks of the two senior brothers behind him, Chung Myung slips out of Mount Hua under the cover of darkness. Wayne County is not far away. This small county at the foot of the mountain has flourished for hundreds of years, thanks to Mount Hua's presence. Yet now, the place is filled with song and dance. Looking again, no one would associate this lively scene with the impoverished Mount Hua sect. Every old shopkeeper here, if traced back far enough, actually has connections to Mount Hua. But listening more closely, the ruthlessness in their words becomes evident. In their eyes, Mount Hua is now nothing more than fish on a chopping board. Among them, shopkeeper Kong appears to know even more secrets than the others. He insists on confiscating buildings that do not seem valuable on the surface. What he truly desires is Mount Hua's terrifying history, something worth thousands, even tens of thousands of times more than the remaining wealth on the mountain. After several rounds of drinks, they all grow intoxicated, drunk on the thought of the fat sheep about to fall into their hands, drunk on wealth that could last them a lifetime. Shopkeeper Liu of the plain cloth workshop hums a tune as he stumbles out, his unsteady steps filled with excitement. Suddenly, a figure appears within his blurred vision. Slightly startled, he sobers up a bit. He realizes he may have encountered a robber, yet confusion follows immediately. Why is it just a little brat? Chung Myung, however, appears utterly confident. He explains that he is not there to rob anyone, but merely hopes the other party will honestly answer a few questions. Hearing this, shopkeeper Liu bursts into laughter. He boasts about how many people work under him, adding that even if he wanted to go out alone, it would be impossible. After saying this, and as if unable to bear witnessing the miserable state of the child before him, he turns his back. He orders his subordinates to handle the brat's questions, and to be rough if necessary, so long as they do not affect his ability to speak. With his back turned, shopkeeper Liu sighs about his own kindness, all while wondering which rival could have sent such a foolish brat. Moments later, a calm voice sounds from behind him, commenting that it was a bit excessive. Shopkeeper Liu freezes in shock, and immediately turns around, only to see that the little brat has already knocked down all of his guards. He hears the other casually beckon him over. Chung Myung's voice grows deeper as he reminds him that as long as he obediently answers the questions, he will not be hurt. However, since resistance was chosen, a beating is unavoidable, though Chung Myung assures that he will still be able to talk afterward. After investigating, Chung Myung learns that these properties originally belonged to Mount Hua. Not only does Mount Hua lack the necessary proof, allowing them to deny ownership, but they also lent money at several times, even dozens of times, the normal interest rate during Mount Hua's moment of crisis. They calculated that the sect would never be able to repay the debt, leading directly to the current situation. Even with this knowledge, Chung Myung finds himself unable to immediately change anything. As a result, the great Plum Blossom swordmaster lies on his dormitory bed, scratching his head in frustration. His thoughts drift back to his senior brother, the sect master from 100 years ago. Every time Chung Myung sought him out, that man always looked guilty, clutching account books as though they were priceless treasures. Suddenly, something feels off. 100 years ago, Mount Hua Peak owned far more than just one or two workshops and taverns. How could everything possibly be recorded in just one or two account books? There is only one explanation: that cunning senior brother sect master must have hidden most of the account books. Moreover, Chung Myung remembers that Mount Hua had a secret vault, one that only the sect master could enter. If his suspicion is correct, then this vault will be the key to breaking the current deadlock. Merely thinking about it gives Chung Myung another headache. He has only ever heard of the secret vault, and has never actually seen it. His current plan is to begin searching in the place he considers most likely. With that decision made, the young man once again leaps out of his room under the cover of night, his small frame carrying a pickaxe larger than his body, as he sneaks toward the back mountain behind the sect master's residence. However, he still underestimated the difficulty of searching an entire mountain. Chung Myung currently possesses very little internal energy. He relies entirely on his battle-hardened experience, carefully drawing out small amounts of true energy and condensing them into fine threads to probe deep beneath the ground. Although this method spares him the immense labor normally required for geomancy, working alone and repeatedly probing the earth nearly drains him to exhaustion. By now, Chung Myung has already expended an enormous amount of energy, yet he dares not stop. No matter what, this represents Mount Hua's final chance. At last, just before dawn, he discovers a faint trace of abnormality underground. Without hesitation, he grabs the pickaxe and begins digging. When he finally excavates a large pit and exposes a layer of bricks beneath the soil, doubt surfaces in his mind. If this truly is Mount Hua's secret vault, How could it have been constructed using such crude materials? With lingering suspicion, Chung Myung pries up a stone brick and peers inside, only to realize that what he uncovered is merely a passage leading toward the vault itself. At that moment, a presence slowly approaches through the darkness. Gradually, Chung Myung recognizes the figure. It is the Sect master. The man stands quietly before the vault's massive door, placing his palm against its seemingly thick surface. After that, he lowers his head, making no attempt to open it. After a long silence, understanding dawns on Chung Myung. The Sect master is not choosing inaction. He is incapable of acting. As the pillar supporting the entire sect, he has no choice but to shoulder that pain and helplessness alone. As a faint ray of morning light spreads across the distant horizon, the sect master departs in solitude. Chung Myung silently drops down from his position, watching the direction the man leaves. He remains quiet, then turns his gaze toward the tightly sealed door. He does not know whether hope for the sect's survival lies behind it. But at this moment, both Chung Myung and Mount Hua have no path of retreat. When the young man attempts to force the door open using compressed internal energy, it does not budge in the slightest. Instead, his refined true energy rebounds violently back at him. A sense of dread wells up in his heart. This realization borders on madness. This door is likely forged from 10,000-year cold iron. Judging from the rebound force alone, its thickness must span at least the width of a hand. Even the greatest master alive might only barely split it open. Only now does he fully understand why the sect master never once considered opening this door. Still, recalling his senior brother, the sect master from 100 years ago, Chung Myung knows that even he was unable to breach this cold iron barrier. That means there must be another method. With renewed focus, Chung Myung carefully examines the door. What he discovers shocks him to the core. The dense sword patterns engraved upon its surface actually contain the 24 moves plum blossom sword technique. Embedded within are bamboo leaf hand, 6 harmonies fist, and even purple cloud body protection energy. This door itself embodies the method required to open it. If it were his former self, accomplishing this would have been trivial. But now, he possesses only peak-level experience within a severely weakened body. To execute so many of Mount Hua's foundational martial arts in a single flow leaves him with only one option, the most dangerous one imaginable. Touching his abdomen, Chung Myung steels himself, treating it as cultivation, deciding to use only the smallest trace of innate true energy. Innate true energy is the life force every person is born with to sustain existence. Bloodshot veins spread across the young man's eyes. The moment he raises the wooden sword, blood begins to seep uncontrollably from the corners of his mouth. As the sword movements gradually unfold, his body and internal energy reach their absolute limits. His motions slow to a crawl, accompanied by the sound of the sword handle cracking under strain, yet stopping is no longer an option. At this moment, Chung Myung embodies the plum blossom swordmaster. With sheer willpower, he barely completes the final movement. His body collapses, kneeling heavily against the ground, just as the door emits a deep grinding groan. With a sharp crack, it slowly swings open before him, but before he can feel relief, blood surges violently from his throat once more. Gasping for breath, he realizes the truth. Recovering from this exertion will require at least 2 months. Even so, he cannot afford to care about that now. Stepping forward, Chung Myung enters the secret vault, only to find that it is scarcely larger than a palm-sized room. There are no divine weapons, no dazzling treasures, only 3 pitiful bookcases. The sight alone reflects just how far Mount Hua has fallen. Yet when he pulls out a journal, realization strikes him like lightning. The entire cabinet is filled with ledgers from Mount Hua dating back 100 years. Crimson excitement flares in his eyes, as he stuffs the documents into his robe until it bulges in every direction. Still, doubt lingers. Could the sect leader's vault truly contain nothing but papers? Scratching his head, Chung Myung turns toward the second bookcase and pulls out another journal. Inside, he discovers a hidden collection of martial techniques his senior brother desperately preserved. It becomes clear that the old man was deeply sentimental. If the left bookcase represents the duties of Mount Hua's sect leader, then the middle one contains his worries and affection for the sect itself. That leaves the final bookcase. Chung Myung slowly unfurls the only scroll within it. Beneath the opening line, "For the sect leader's eyes only," are nearly 1,000 densely written words of instruction. The message speaks of Mount Hua's true teachings. A sect leader's role is not to command the entire sect, but to nurture its disciples and provide them with sustenance. One must never attempt to bind their souls or spirits. Whether Mount Hua declines or rises to prosperity beneath the heavens, Mount Hua remains Mount Hua. The ancestors' will must be passed on to future generations. 21st generation sect leader, Chung Myung staring at the dense passage. Chung Myung reads it with rare focus. To him, this scroll resembles his senior brother's final testament. Though he found no immediate wealth, this haul alone is enough to turn the sect's fate around. Yet just as he prepares to leave, something feels off. He freezes and looks back. The arrangement of this room feels unbalanced. His senior brother had always possessed severe obsessive tendencies. That final bookcase, something is wrong. Acting on instinct, Chung Myung grips it with both hands and forcefully lifts it aside, revealing a hidden chamber beneath, glowing with golden light. His jaw drops. What a cunning fox. The hidden chamber is small, so cramped that even he cannot stand upright within it. but his eyes sparkle like stars. Inside lie mountains of gold bricks, countless precious swords, and piles of secret manuals and gemstones he has never seen before. Before he can dwell on the matter any further, Chung Myung hears Yoonjin shouting urgently from outside. When the sect leader opens the door, Yoonjin hesitates, insisting that the sect leader must personally see something with his own eyes. Yoonjin is normally calm and composed, so witnessing him in such a state leaves the sect leader with no choice but to suppress his concerns, and follow him toward the mountain peak where the third-generation disciples usually train. Along the way, the sect leader sees children sprawled across the ground, barely conscious, some even collapsed where they stood. His heart tightens in disbelief. Even as Yoonjin explains that the disciples merely pushed themselves too hard during training, the sect leader struggles to accept such an explanation. However, when they finally reach Chung Myung, his shock deepens further. The boy's face is deathly pale, his body trembling uncontrollably, weakened to the point of resembling a walking corpse from the severe depletion of innate true energy. Before the sect leader can utter a single word, Chung Myung weakly raises his hand, gesturing for him to look ahead. In the next instant, a golden radiance surges forth like divine light descending from the heavens. The overwhelming aura presses down so heavily that the sect leader nearly forgets how to breathe. Before his eyes lies a full sack of gold bricks, accompanied by a neatly stacked pile of pristine swords. To the sect leader, this cannot simply be described as timely rain, it is nothing short of a miracle that saves Mount Hua from the brink of destruction. Then his gaze lands on the journals. If these ledgers are genuine, their value far exceeds that of the gold itself. The sect leader instinctively reaches for one, only to freeze mid-motion, becoming as cautious as a startled kitten. The thought of damaging even a single page makes his scalp tingle. Death itself would not be enough to atone. His thoughts race wildly, yet his trembling hand unconsciously shifts toward the sword manuals instead. With only a brief glance, his trained eyes immediately recognize them as authentic master-level techniques. What shocks him even more is that these are Mount Hua's long-lost martial arts techniques that vanished over 100 years ago. The overwhelming impact proves too much. With a dull thud, the sect leader collapses on the spot. When he awakens a day later, drenched in cold sweat, and clutching 7 Plum Blossom sword records tightly against his chest, panic seizes him. Doubt floods his mind as he desperately wonders whether everything he saw was merely a dream. In a frenzy, he verifies the journals one by one and urgently summons financial officials from nearby counties to authenticate the ledgers from Hunyang County. Only after their confirmation does the 60-year-old sect leader finally break down in tears. Heaven alone knows how long he has borne this crushing burden in solitude. That child, he truly is Mount Hua's heaven-sent fortune. Without hesitation, the sect leader issues an immediate order. Messengers are dispatched to Hunyang County, summoning every shopkeeper involved to Mount Hua without delay. Several days later, merchants arrive one after another at the battered mountain gate. Most assume Mount Hua intends to beg for an extension on its debts. Some feel conflicted, remembering that this sect protected them for generations. Others harbor nothing but greed. Kong the gorilla, however, carries only malice in his heart. The merchants are led into the sect leader's residence. Wearing a gentle and composed smile, the sect leader receives them with courtesy, expressing appreciation for the effort they made to come and inviting them to have tea. Kong the gorilla scoffs openly, pressing to skip all pleasantries and address the debt directly. The sect leader nods slowly and lets out a sigh. He explains that Mount Hua has exhausted every possible option. Raising 100,000 taels within the deadline is impossible, and he can only repay a portion of the debt for now. He then humbly asks whether anyone present possesses the compassion to extend the deadline. With that, he bows deeply, lowering himself without hesitation and pleading for Mount Hua's survival. From a distance, Chung Myung observes in silence. Though his body remains weak, his eyes gleam with sharp curiosity. He wonders whether this display is a carefully laid trap or a sincere plea. As the sect leader, does this man truly possess such resolve? Gong Wenlian presses the matter further, refusing to relent. The sect leader straightens his back. He makes it clear that his appeal is not directed at a single individual, but at everyone present. Though Mount Hua has declined, that does not mean no one stands with it. Should anyone choose to help Mount Hua through this crisis, repayment will be sworn in Mount Hua's name. At that moment, shopkeeper Lu steps forward. The excitement he once displayed is gone, replaced entirely by solemn respect. He quietly questions how trust can be placed in Mount Hua when the sect itself might disappear tomorrow. The sect leader answers without the slightest hesitation, declaring that Mount Hua's name alone, the soul passed down through thousands of years, serves as his pledge. Silence descends upon the hall. After a long pause, shopkeeper Lu exhales deeply. He admits that his decision may be foolish, but Kong, having married into Hunyang County, could never understand what Mount Hua truly represents. He speaks of growing up on stories of Mount Hua, of elders urging children to aspire toward it, to protect Shangxi. Even those without talent took pride in Mount Hua's existence. His father and grandfather lived their entire lives beneath its shadow. If he were to take the money today and personally destroy Mount Hua, he knows he would never find peace again. With that, shopkeeper Lu steps aside. Gasps ripple through the room. Then one after another, shopkeepers whose roots lie in Hua County follow his example. The sect leader's lips slowly curve into a quiet, satisfied smile. This was exactly what he wished to confirm. He signals Yunnan. When officials enter carrying the authenticated ledgers, Kong the gorilla's face drains of all color. Realization strikes him far too late. The time wasted climbing Mount Hua has already allowed their properties below to be seized. The sect leader's voice turns cold. He states that Mount Hua showed kindness for generations, yet that kindness was repaid with betrayal. Therefore, using these ledgers, all ill-gotten wealth will be confiscated. Gong Wenlian grinds his teeth in fury. Still, mercy is granted. Each offender may take a single cart of personal belongings and leave Huayan County forever. Those who stood with Mount Hua may continue managing the businesses under Mount Hua's banner and will be properly rewarded. The sect leader then instructs them to move inside to discuss the finer details. The next morning, Chung Myung learns that Gong Wenlian is being allowed to leave with his possessions. Alarmed, he skips breakfast and rushes down the mountain. Fortunately, officials are thoroughly inspecting the departing group, preventing them from leaving quickly. But Gong Wenlian is far from finished. Chung Myung arrives just in time to hear him sneer, declaring his intention to seek higher authorities and accuse Mount Hua of forging its ledgers. Chung Myung's gaze darkens instantly. So that is his plan. This development makes the boy, who originally only intended to rob them, grow far more cautious. Shopkeeper Kong, however, finds the situation amusing. Seeing Chung Myung hunched over and dressed like a bandit in broad daylight, he laughs inwardly and waves his hand dismissively, warning that attempting to rob their possessions would only result in a meaningless death. Chung Myung is straightforward. He bluntly tells the man that the possessions do not belong to him alone but are shared property. When he hears that the other party is from the Mount Hua sect, he reacts with irritation, thinking it is perfect timing. He had been unable to swallow his anger anyway, and since they came looking for trouble, he orders them to be killed. Multiple thugs immediately draw their swords and rush forward, closing in on the boy at tremendous speed. Chung Myung merely casts a lazy glance before instantly leaping into the air. He meets the one charging at the front head-on mid-air. The sound of repeated strikes echoes non-stop, and the screams of the attackers arrive all at once as the boy lands. He coldly conveys that since ancient times, no one who ignored him had ever managed to keep all their limbs intact. Chung Myung does not even bother drawing his sword, as he has no intention of deliberately killing them. However, the scene fills shopkeeper Kong with deep alarm. He orders the remaining thugs to stand down and slowly steps forward himself. With each step, a purple light suddenly bursts from Kong's body. He admits that he never expected Mount Hua to still have someone like this, and realizes that something about Chung Myung had felt off from the beginning. He acknowledges that a mere county shopkeeper should not possess such an aura, but assures himself that he will at least leave Chung Myung able to speak. With a thunderous crash in the forest, the imposing Kong strikes, only to hit empty air. As a martial artist, he understands well that even a lion uses its full strength to catch a rabbit. Because Chung Myung instantly defeated the guards, Kong holds nothing back. Yet no matter how hard he attacks, he cannot touch his opponent. Chung Myung, facing him like a raging storm, calmly uses his sword pommel to press perfectly against the precise moment when Kong's internal force-laden fist is about to erupt. The blocked force immediately rebounds, completely damaging Kong's right hand. Chung Myung casually remarks that Kong is far too slow and advises him to quit while he is ahead. This only makes shopkeeper Kong grind his teeth in fury. Secretly, he channels energy through his feet, sending a shockwave of internal force toward Chung Myung. However, the attack passes straight through the boy's figure, as if striking nothing but air, exploding somewhere in the distance. By the time Kong realizes it, his opponent has already vanished. This only leaves Kong more baffled. From personal experience, he knows Chung Myung is neither stronger nor faster than him. Judging by raw power alone, Chung Myung would not even compare to 10% of his own strength. Yet every time at the most perfect moment, Chung Myung uses the most precise force to overturn the entire battle, as if he can predict every move in advance. This makes it impossible for Kong to even gauge how strong his opponent truly is. He comes to the horrifying conclusion that this man is undoubtedly a monster. Chung Myung rolls his neck and announces that he had planned to play around a bit longer but has grown tired. As he speaks, he charges forward. Seeing his left knee about to be struck, Kong hastily drops into a defensive stance, only to have his shoulder injured instead. Before he can understand what happened, his head is targeted next. He instinctively raises his arm to block, but what appeared to be a slashing motion suddenly turns into a thrust. The sharp pain in his throat twists his entire face as he staggers backward dozens of steps. Kong cannot comprehend it. He clearly sees the movements, yet he cannot dodge even a single strike. As the attacks continue, fear grips him. He realizes that if this goes on, he will truly die. What terrifies him most are Chung Myung's eyes, which carry the unmistakable look of someone who has slaughtered countless enemies. A crisp sound of a sword being drawn rings through the air, as the boy raises his blade to strike again. Panic overwhelms Kong. In that instant, a blue palm force shoots skyward from the forest. Even after the dust settles, electric arcs linger around his palm. He can no longer restrain himself and unleashes his ultimate technique. Tai godly palm. Chung Myung immediately recognizes the origin of the technique and identifies him as being from the Southern Edge sect. Seeing Kong's face filled with regret and frustration, Chung Myung realizes that he had grown careless. Facing someone from Mount Hua, Kong should never have revealed his sect's martial arts, even if death awaited him. Still, Chung Myung grins as merely confirming the involvement of the Southern Edge sect is more than enough for him. What Chung Myung did not expect was that although the martial world of the past had been ruthless, it had never been this shameless. Major powers like the 9 sects one guild no longer relied solely on martial force but instead used wealth to crush other sects. Kong Wen remained silent for a long time before suddenly stating that this situation might not necessarily be a bad thing for Mount Hua. Having lost its martial heritage, Mount Hua could never return to its former glory, and its downfall was only a matter of time. He simply wished to end this dying sect quickly. Chung Myung stares at him as if looking at a dead man and questions whoever claimed that Mount Hua lost its martial heritage. He dismisses Kong's attempt to justify his actions with words, stating that he might as well admit he simply wanted Mount Hua destroyed. Regardless, as repayment for revealing the Tai Divine Palm, Chung Myung decides to show him something interesting. If Kong can figure out what it is, it would be amusing. He also makes it clear that the message should be properly reported back to whoever sent him. Chung Myung's sword blade sways gently. Kong does not even dare breathe heavily. The sword thrusts forward as if multiplying, yet it does not pierce his body. Instead, Kong's clothes split apart like tofu under a blade, leaving him utterly confused. He cannot understand what Chung Myung is trying to do. Through the wind, Chung Myung's voice faintly carries poetic words about plum blossoms blooming in snow, emitting the richest fragrance. He speaks of Mount Hua enduring winter, yet its spirit never being severed, and how when spring arrives plum blossoms will blanket the entire mountain. Kong cannot understand a single word of it. Slowly lifting his head, Kong Wenium is struck with horror as he sees plum blossom petals falling across the mountain. He cannot believe his eyes. The cascading petals gradually converge toward him. At last, realization strikes. This is the 24-move plum blossom sword technique, falling plum rain. As Chung Myung sheaths his sword, shopkeeper Kong collapses to the ground. He tears off his mask and spits out a mouthful of blood. In truth, Chung Myung's internal force is far from sufficient to fully execute the plum blossom sword technique, but it is enough to serve as a warning to the Southern Edge sect. Turning around, Chung Myung calls the remaining men over and tells them they now have 2 choices: leave immediately or be beaten before leaving anyway. The 4 remaining men have no will to resist and are already preparing to flee, but Chung Myung calls them back. He questions whether they have any sense at all and refuses to haul 5 carts back by himself. He orders them to convert all the goods into cash and exchange it for bearer banknotes. He warns that if he finds any markings on the notes, they will suffer the consequences. As for reporting to the officials, Chung Myung's gaze turns cold. He stomps the ground hard and tells them they are free to try, but if they do, they must flee to the ends of the earth and never return, because he will never let the matter go. The 4 men are on the verge of tears, unable to imagine any escape from his grasp. In less than half an hour, Chung Myung sniffs the bundle of gleaming banknotes in his hand. Satisfied, he finally returns to Mount Hua, and it is still morning. The children have just finished their morning training. Joe Gol, the former school bully, watches everyone complain and for the first time, feels the joy of cultivation. The senior brother has already finished washing up and asks Joe Gol why he is smiling. Joe Gol replies that he simply feels that everyone finally looks like true martial academy disciples. Though Mount Hua has always been a martial academy, it is a strange realization, yet the senior brother agrees, as he shares the same thought. He calls for the junior brothers to head back. On the way, Joe Gol's heart remains full of gratitude toward Chung Myung. Since his arrival, Mount Hua has truly changed. When they reach the mountain gate, they are surprised to find many unfamiliar faces carrying large and small packages, seemingly engaged in construction work. Entering the inner courtyard, they see Uncle Yoon acting as a foreman, loudly instructing everyone to be careful and slow down. After asking around, they learn that the sect leader is taking this opportunity to thoroughly renovate every hall and pavilion on Mount Hua. The timing of the 3rd-generation disciples is perfect. Union immediately has the youngsters go assist the carpenter uncles. Years from now, every brick and tile laid here will surely carry deeper meaning for them. That night, the boys stare in shock at the roasted chicken placed on the table. Since coming up the mountain, this is the first time they have seen meat in the dining hall, and not just a little, but an entire table full. They had almost forgotten what meat even tasted like. Did Mount Hua suddenly strike it rich? Although they do not know the truth, the youngsters are genuinely delighted. Not only is there large-scale construction underway, but there is meat in the dining hall as well, and everyone has even received 2 new sets of martial robes. Joe Gol looks toward Jin Jiang, who remains dazed. He asks what is wrong with him. Hearing Jogul's voice, Xinjiang smiles faintly and explains that nothing is wrong. He simply realizes all at once that money is truly a wonderful thing. He never expected that once funds were available, the elders would move so quickly to enact changes. This is also the first time he has ever seen Uncle Union smile so happily. However, Xinjiang also points out that Mount Hua is changing at a tremendous pace, and that they must prepare themselves as soon as possible. Although he does not understand why that boy uses such clumsy acting to conceal bringing in so many resources, one thing is certain: if they fail to adapt to this rushing wind of change, they may very well be swept away by the storm that child brings. Jogul laughs and reassures him not to worry, confidently declaring himself as Jogul. And so in every sense, Mount Hua begins to stir with a powerful wind of revival from the inside out. As for Chung Myun, he is soon summoned by the sect leader. Having benefited greatly from the boy, the elders originally planned to reward him with money. However, Chung Myun treats money as if it were dirt beneath his notice. This reaction makes the sect leader's eyes sparkle as he looks at the youngster. What the boy does not know is that there is still plenty of wealth stored in the sect leader's vault. Even if the sect leader were willing to give some away, it would not amount to much. When asked what reward he desires instead, the elders suggest granting him access to martial arts that third-generation disciples are normally forbidden from learning. Yet Chung Myun refuses this as well. He offers a lofty explanation, stating that cultivation should follow proper order step by step. In truth, however, he is troubled by something else entirely. There are still many martial manuals hidden in the vault. Figuring out how to naturally pass those along without raising suspicion is a genuine headache. To avoid further strange reward suggestions, Chung Myun proactively requests permission to freely enter and leave Hunyang County. Doing so would expand his range of activities and make future endeavors more convenient. After much consideration, Shang Jiang ultimately rejects the proposal. His reasoning is simple: he does not wish to break sect rules and risk stirring dissatisfaction. The sect leader's rigid adherence to tradition leaves Chung Myun unable to think of anything else that a cash-strapped Mount Hua could realistically offer. Suddenly the boy experiences a flash of inspiration. He brings up his poor health, explaining that the medicine hall diagnosed damage to his vital energy. He asks whether the sect could bestow upon him spirit pills capable of replenishing it. Silence immediately falls over the room. After a moment, Shang Jiang calmly takes a sip from his cup, and then announces that, in the name of the Mount Hua sect leader, disciple Chung Myun is henceforth permitted to freely enter and leave Hunyang County. The boy's gaze sweeps across everyone in shock. After delivering the decree, Shang Jiang prepares to send Chung Myun back to rest and recover. Chung Myun hurriedly reminds him that he asked for spirit pills. The sect leader's expression makes it unmistakably clear that even if one were to consume him whole, there would still be no spirit pills to give. Once the door closes, Shang Jiang finally asks the others what they think of the child. Union's opinion is straightforward. He senses no childish immaturity in Chung Myun whatsoever. Instead, the boy even exudes an aura of one who has lived through countless eras. The most plausible explanation must be innate Taoist energy. Shang Jiang's judgment is more cautious. Even children who endured hardship from a young age would not mature to such a degree. It is not that the boy is overly scheming, rather Shang Jiang dares not think further. The martial manuals Chung Myun brought back, supposedly preserved for over 100 years, look as though the ink has barely dried. If this were a conspiracy, the contents would not be so righteous. It seems more likely that someone is deliberately hiding their identity while aiding Mount Hua, but who could it be? Meanwhile, the boy who has already departed walks away fuming. He exhausted himself copying manuals by hand, yet did not receive even a single spirit pill in return. Judging from Shang Jiang's reaction, these people have likely lost the art of pill refinement as well. The situation is now serious. Although he knew mobilizing innate true energy would bring side effects, he never expected them to be so severe. If he rests quietly for half a year, this body will undoubtedly miss its optimal cultivation period. A solution must be found. As far as Chung Myun knows, there are only two ways to quickly restore true energy. One is consuming precious spirit pills, the other is receiving energy transfer from someone with comparable internal force. The latter is nothing more than fantasy. He recalls Mount Hua in the past, when spirit pills were so abundant they were eaten like candy. More often than not, they were used as hangover remedies. The thought of that era nearly makes him sigh in nostalgia, drinking freely while hiding from the senior brother sect leader. Suddenly, the idea of hangover remedies strikes him. The boy immediately sprints toward the back mountain, even cursing himself for being foolish. This cliff is the highest and most dangerous among Mount Hua's 5 sacred peaks. Hidden here is a secret base, known only to Chung Myun himself. Back then, to avoid the sect leader's supervision, he stashed quite a few spirit pills and fine wines here. He briefly wonders why the senior brother sect leader never silenced him permanently. If their roles were reversed, he would have beaten someone like himself to death. Still, there should be spirit pills hidden there. Flying up now is impossible. Descending from the top only increases the danger tenfold. After some hesitation, he decides to proceed anyway. The boy begins his descent, unaware that the cliff earned the name Heartbreak because its surface offers almost no footholds at all. In other words, it is incredibly smooth. He accidentally slips and falls, but fortunately had tied a rope to a tree beforehand. This prevents him from instantly becoming a sacrifice to the earth. However, the cliff's shape bulges outward above and caves inward below, causing his body to swing violently in midair with no way to return. Thankfully, Chung Myung is experienced. He activates the absorption technique, wrapping it around his hand to forcibly adhere himself to the cliff wall. The impact is tremendous. The sound of bones cracking nearly knocks him unconscious. This body is still far too fragile. Even so, the hiding place is close enough to reach, and he believes he can endure. What he forgets is that this is not a dream. During the time it takes him to regain balance, the rope has already worn through. With a sharp snap, the rope breaks, and the boy is flung outward by momentum. He desperately tries to save himself with the absorption technique. His fingers barely catch a crevice before more bones break. Though he cannot fully stop his fall, most of the momentum is neutralized, and he barely lands at the cave entrance. Dizzy and bloodied, he nearly falls off the cliff once more. In the end, luck intervenes. The broken rope becomes lodged in a rock crevice, sparing him from death yet again. Crawling toward the cave entrance, his body covered in wounds, Chung Myung harbors deep resentment toward the Plum Blossom Swordmaster, who chose to hide treasures in such a god-forsaken place. Only someone who trained martial arts until their brain broke would think of doing something like this. Then it hits him. In those days, he must have forgotten something crucial. He himself is that cursed Plum Blossom Swordmaster. The cave is simple. A luminous pearl illuminates the space, bearing witness to Mount Hua's prosperity 100 years ago. His collection here is modest: 2 jugs of century-old fine wine and a full box of spirit pills once reserved for hangovers. Chung Myung slowly opens the familiar wooden box, and a rich medicinal fragrance wafts into the air. Only then does he discover with delight that the box also contains 5 even more precious snowplum pills. Perhaps having grown accustomed to poverty and the dilapidated state of Mount Hua in recent times, he now stares at what he once consumed like candy and begins to drool. His hand trembles as he carefully picks one up. Without the slightest hesitation, he swallows it. The spirit pill dissolves instantly upon entering his throat. An elegant fragrance spreads throughout every inch of his body. Though the sensation is pleasant, he has no time to linger. If the medicinal power is not guided properly, it will quickly dissipate. However, snowplum pills are now exceedingly precious. Back in the past, they were merely mid-grade spirit pills. Using them to replenish innate true energy requires constant refinement within the body to prevent impurities from damaging the flawless foundation he once painstakingly built. An hour later, he finally refines 2 portions of pure medicinal power. Chung Myung carefully guides them into his dantian. The medicinal energy immediately becomes active like a startled rabbit, rushing straight toward his innate true energy and continuously repairing every deficiency. Moments later, a low rumble echoes through the cave. Chung Myung's entire body is lifted into midair by an unseen force. Yet the youngster's face shows no relief even as his innate true energy becomes fully replenished. A terrifying surge of true energy erupts within him, power that does not belong to him. Inside his body, broken bones and wounds rapidly repair themselves at a visible speed, becoming even sturdier than before. An immature body, after all, can absorb medicinal effects more perfectly. Even the impurities within him are constantly expelled by the overwhelming medicinal force. At this point, the objective of his risky venture has already been achieved. However, the medicinal power of the spirit pill shows no sign of fading. His dantian is forcibly breached by the surging energy. He understands all too well that if this continues, he will fall into a state no different from chi deviation. Unable to allow that, Chung Myung desperately suppresses the violent power raging within him. Suddenly, his mind recalls the words of the senior brother sect leader, that Mount Hua enters the Tao through martial arts, that humans follow earth, earth follows heaven, heaven follows the Tao, and the Tao follows nature. Suppression alone can never solve anything. Realizing this, Chung Myung slowly releases his control over the internal force. In that instant, despite knowing how absurd it sounds, he chooses to trust the senior brother sect leader. As his upper dantian swells to the brink of bursting, he dares not imagine the consequences if this power breaks through. His body would undoubtedly be destroyed. The energy inside him resembles a raging flood or savage beast, and his small dantian is utterly incapable of containing it. Reflecting inwardly, he admits that he once believed those words were nothing more than nagging. Yet after 100 years, he finally begins to grasp their meaning. As the boy actively opens his upper dantian, the accumulated power surges outward in its entirety, flooding into his limbs and body. When dawn finally approaches and the sky remains dim, Chung Myung slowly opens his eyes. Still disoriented, he wonders why he is floating. A moment later, he crashes straight down onto the ground. As he regains awareness, he senses the changes within himself. His meridians feel significantly more open, and the strength he can exert has multiplied several times over. It appears this young body ultimately endured the strain. At that moment, he feels an even deeper sense of gratitude toward the senior brother sect leader. Chung Myung once believed himself to be nothing more than a pure swordsman, not a Taoist. Yet Mount Hua's true essence lies in the inseparability of sword and Tao. Scratching his head, he questions whether a disciple with such poor comprehension could truly lead Mount Hua to rise again. He glances at the spirit pills that are now useless to him, and finally sets aside such doubts. Regardless of the outcome, he resolves to try. After tidying up, he prepares to head back, naturally not forgetting to bring the century-old wine. With his newfound strength, using lightness skills is no longer difficult. This time, he relies on no tools whatsoever. In just 5 steps, he reaches the mountaintop. Normally, the morning air at the peak is refreshingly crisp. However, the foul stench of impurities expelled from his body overwhelms him, causing him to vomit. Meanwhile, at White Plum Hall, the children once again drag themselves half asleep to morning training. Rumors of Chung Myung's recent frail appearance have already spread among the disciples. Some even claim he suffered chi deviation. Otherwise, they reason why would he appear more haggard with each passing day. Although they still fear his tyranny, a few begin to think that if the rumors are true, ganging up together might finally allow them to overpower him. Jogul worries these fools are about to earn another beating, and considers talking them out of it. However, the senior brother stops him, remarking that when people are itching for a beating, they sometimes need to be reminded what pain feels like. When the gate opens, everyone turns to look. What they see leaves them stunned. Chung Myung stands radiant, brimming with vitality, with no trace of weakness remaining. Panic spreads among the children. Challenging him now would surely end in disaster. Clearly, the young man hears their whispering. Chung Myung announces that he feels deep guilt for being unable to properly oversee their training previously. The children immediately sense danger and hurriedly respond that it is fine. However, Chung Myung continues, stating that although the past cannot be changed, it can be compensated for. If the previous training was insufficient, it can simply be doubled. He points toward Lotus Peak behind the hall and declares that anyone who finishes the last half to the summit late must run it again. The youngsters remain frozen in shock, but the senior brother has already started moving, with Xinjiang following closely behind. Realizing that Demon Myung is not joking, those still standing are jolted awake when Chung Myung adds that the last one to arrive will receive no dinner. In an instant, they dash toward the mountain. In truth, Chung Myung has no intention of punishing them. On the contrary, he rather likes their rebellious spirit. However, rebellion without strength only turns one into a clown. For martial artists, dissatisfaction can only be expressed through power, and that is precisely what Chung Myung aims to cultivate in them. Throughout thousands of years of martial history, countless individuals claimed supremacy through personal strength. Yet a sect that relies on only one powerful disciple can never endure. These children are Chung Myung's most precious treasure in restoring Mount Hua's former glory. Unfortunately for them, the already brutal training intensity multiplies several times over. Even Jogul, who possesses the strongest foundation, becomes too exhausted to move. Looking up, he is shocked to see the senior brother still standing. Their abilities are similar, yet senior brother Yin's mental fortitude far surpasses his own. Despite knowing the children have reached their limits, Chung Myung shows no intention of letting them rest. He even orders continued training after lunch, warning that anyone who dares flee will face 10 times the punishment. Days pass in this manner. Although the dining hall now serves hearty meals with meat at nearly every sitting, the children lack even the strength to eat. Their bodies instinctively reject food, threatening to vomit at the slightest bite. Complaints spread endlessly. The children beg the senior brother to negotiate with Demon Myung, claiming they will surely die if this continues. Amid the chaos, senior brother Yin understands their condition all too well. Looking at his own trembling hands, he knows collapse is inevitable if this persists. He turns to Jogul for his opinion. After thinking it over, Jogul suggests enduring for a few more days. That boy may be strict, but he surely understands that training people is not the same as forging iron. If no improvement occurs after some time, it will not be too late to speak up. Returning to the dormitory, he reassures everyone, though he himself has no idea how much longer he can last. Exhaustion quickly claims him. He falls asleep almost instantly, only to be groggily awakened by a voice. Upon realizing it is Chung Myung, he wearily sits up, barely registering what the young man is saying. He sees the young man's open palm. Resting there is a gleaming spirit pill. The sight jolts him fully awake. Confusion flashes across his face as he wonders why something so precious would be given to him. Chung Myung meets his gaze calmly and explains that the pill is being given because Jogul needs it more than he does, but stresses that it must be kept secret. Jogul agrees without hesitation. In that moment he is completely won over. For the first time he even feels ashamed for once thinking of Chung Myung as a demon. What he does not know is that the young man deliberately pushed them to the brink of collapse precisely to create this moment. By doing so, not only would they never dare slack off in training again, they would also follow his instructions obediently from now on. Thus the youngsters begin advancing by leaps and bounds. Their upper bodies grow stronger, and their foundations become remarkably solid. Hyunyan is not blind. In such a short span of time, the children's swords now carry faint traces of sword energy, steady and balanced. This is not strength they possessed even half a month ago. Even more precious than that is the change in their eyes. They are resolute and fierce. Yeonyeon cannot help but wonder how that kid Chung Myung managed to accomplish all of this. Regardless, the White Plum Hallmaster finds himself in an exceptionally good mood. As a result, he announces that the disciples have progressed rapidly and are allowed to learn the Tai illusory sword ahead of schedule. Instantly the children erupt with excitement. Every face beams with the joy of finally reaping what they have sown. However, at that moment the Sect master suddenly arrives at White Plum Hall. He calls Yeonyeon aside, wearing an expression rarely seen, like a child who has made a mistake. Slowly he takes out the Mount Hua basic sword manual that Chung Myung brought back and asks Yeonyeon to turn to the final page. With just one glance, Yeonyeon feels as though he has been struck by lightning. The words recorded there instruct future generations. While successors developing martial arts is understandable, the Six Harmonies sword is a foundational technique that allows disciples infinite progression on the path of the sword. It is nearly perfect. If modifications are ever made, the text warns not to put the cart before the horse, because the Six Harmonies sword is the very soul that has sustained Mount Hua for 1,000 years. The Sect master is now conflicted. Since Yeonyeon is the one responsible for teaching the disciples, he asks whether the children should abandon the newly modified Six Harmonies technique. While the new method emphasizes quick results, it is ultimately inferior. If Mount Hua were not in decline, such a mistake would never have been made. Yeonyeon understands this clearly. The true Six Harmonies sword requires an exceptionally solid foundation and a strong physical body, things that demand long-term cultivation. Suddenly realization strikes him. Haven't these children already achieved exactly that? He immediately turns around and looks toward Chung Myung, stopping the young man mid-motion as he casually picks his nose. After everything that has happened, they are now actually asking for Chung Myung's opinion. To their surprise, the little fellow chooses without hesitation. He chooses the Six Harmonies sword, the path that allows them to reach even greater heights. His reasoning is simple. He states that it is because they are Mount Hua. Whether intentional or not, those words strike at the heart of their deepest concern. Shang Jiang immediately understands. The child is saying that no matter how desperate the sect's current need for strength may be, it is merely a difficulty to overcome, not a reason to abandon its roots. As they watch the young men leave, Yeonyeon feels an undeniable sense of pride, while Shang Jiang shows a trace of shame. He never expected to hear such words spoken by a child. Yeonyeon receives the order. From this day forward, Mount Hua's basic technique will return to the Six Harmonies sword. Not only that, but all martial arts manuals must be reorganized and carefully reconsidered. This will be his most important duty as White Plum Hallmaster. Under no circumstances can Mount Hua be allowed to continue drifting in mediocrity. Perhaps their generation will not achieve greatness, but these children will surely make Mount Hua renowned throughout the world once again. Just as the two elders are filled with passion, Chung Myung can no longer suppress his inner fury. He finds the situation ridiculous. The food is already placed right at their mouths, yet they still ask how to eat it. Not a single one of them seems competent with this attitude. His thoughts immediately turn to Hunyang County. No, he needs to check on it quickly. Without him, the sect truly seems incapable of functioning properly. The money problem was resolved, the martial arts were recovered, things should have improved. Yet judging from the expressions he has seen, something is clearly wrong. Hunyang County is now in chaos. In less than a month it has lost its former prosperity and order entirely.